So my number three movie is Heidi from 1937. And this is a film directed by Alan Dwan, starring Shirley Temple,
Mhm.
Jean Hershot, and Arthur Josephson. The IMDb plot summary: a plucky little orphan girl gets dumped abruptly into her gruff hermit grandfather's care, and then later gets retaken and delivered as a companion for an injured girl. So this movie, well, first of all, like I mentioned, Shirley Temple film. She was a giant star in the 30s and into the early 40s. That I watched a lot of her movies as a very young child. They were always on rotation. This wasn't one of my favorite ones to be sure, but I think it fits in a lot with this episode. Actually, the first time we've talked about a Shirley Temple movie on this podcast, because of the amount of times I'd watch these movies, it is kind of interesting why these haven't come up more. Maybe I need to think back to what shaped me as like a 5-year-old when I was watching all these films. But for this one, I think, and it is based on a folk tale, or actually it's a book, Heidi. So there's been a lot of adaptations of the story over the years, and I've
Yeah.
seen many different versions, and I've never actually read I think it's based on an actual book, which I've never read as a kid, but I'd seen a lot of these adaptations, and is a story that I've always enjoyed as a child. But this was the definitive version, at least for me, because I think it's the one I definitely saw the most. And for this one, it's it. The reason why I brought this into the podcast is it is an interesting sort of look at the relationship between a grandchild and a grandparent. When you're a young child and you get kind of meet your grandparent, at least for me, it didn't really feel like family necessarily. Oh, this is just this old person. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, your grandparents are some of the first old people you really know.
Yeah.
And you sort of, as a very, very young child, again, I'm talking like when I was like 4, 5, 6, this is sort of where a lot of my experiences in this podcast will come from, because those are my very early impressions of grandparents. It is just about hey, there's this old person. You don't really know them very well. In the same way in this film, Heidi just kind of gets dropped off at her grandfather's house. She's never met him before. He's very estranged. So she doesn't even have any context to who this person is,
Mhm.
no stories from her parents who are passed away. So she has no context other than, oh, this person is supposed to love me. And in the beginning of the film, like, he definitely is very standoffish. He expresses love, but in his own way to her, that is definitely not a way that a parent would express love to a child. I mean, there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where they're sitting down at like a dinner table, and he just gives her, hey, sit down, like, I made you some food. So okay, he's making for food, that's showing affection. But he doesn't give her like a high chair, and this chair is like completely, like, she can't even reach the table when she sits in it. And he just doesn't seem to care or do anything about that. It's like, oh, okay, well, you can't reach the table, you're just a kid. But then Heidi and her plucky, like, Shirley Templeness, she goes off and like solves her own problem, and then is up at the high chair, which are things that you would think a parent might immediately think, oh, I got to make sure everything's right for my child. But a grandparent, that's not necessarily the first reaction that they have. They're just, hey, look, like, I'm giving you the food, like, that should be enough of a way to kind of show your affection and love for that person. And also, your grandparents' life is so outside of your own, or at least for me, like, I wasn't around these people very often, and my grandparents, so they felt like this other life that had no connection to my own, which is a lot like, again, Heidi in this film just is now in the mountain town, and she's not from this village. She knows nothing about the culture or anything else, and she does feel a little bit like out of place. But then as the movie progresses and the story goes along, they do fall for one another. Sounds kind of weird, but their relationship
Mhm.
changes to the point where he genuinely does love and care for Heidi, and show it in the ways that Heidi wants as well. And at the end of the film, when she gets taken away, he spends most of the third act just trying to find her, hunt her down sounds too harsh, but find where she is to get her back, because he does genuinely love and care for the child, and is part of, he accepts her into his family. And much like she does too, she misses her grandfather, even though in the beginning she's very, like, unsure of who this person is and why she's really there. Even there's a scene where he's kind of getting a knife out to cut some bread, and she's worried, like, oh my God, is he going to stab me? Like, there's that much distrust in the beginning, but in the end, they both end up realizing how important they are, and what that love is, and how important that is between a grandchild and a grandparent. So I think a lot of these feelings were how I kind of felt in the very beginning, when I was super young, in terms of my relationship with my grandparents. Had you seen this film before?
No, I'd not seen the movie. Familiar with the story and Heidi as a book, although
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd read the book. But yeah, very sweet film. And she's so great. It's unbelievable that such a little child just has so much charisma
Oh
and
yeah.
is able to carry this movie pretty much on her own shoulders. Like, you can't take your eyes off her. And this movie is, obviously from decades ago, but it holds up because of her. You could kind of reduce the story to it being corny and cheesy and such, but she kind of cuts through it,
Mm-hmm.
and then, like you said, their relationship is amazing. And I thought this movie actually could have been a lot more cheesier, but I like that they don't spell out per se as to how their relationship is growing. They just
Right.
like
Right.
little signs and nods that, to kind of build on the chair story. Next, we see the grandfather has built a chair for her,
Right.
or they're singing, or they have these routines where they take the sleigh and go in the snow and do stuff together. So they just start to build their relationship, which is very much how I think it would happen in real life, because
Mm-hmm.
the grandfather, the fact that he's estranged and kind of portrayed as somebody who's kind of maybe even lost his way and is maybe
Mm-hmm.
senile or lives alone and such, that's more of a projection of society, the
Correct.
town
Right.
that they live in. And but the truth is that this person was wronged by the town, maybe even wronged by his own son, who
Right.
went and got married, and but I think he seeks love. He wants that.
He does.
All of this is an exterior coping mechanism to kind of deal with the fallout that he's had. But once again, we don't, this movie can be so much more melodramatic. We don't see him like sitting around pining or, being crotchety just for no reason. He just is going about his day.
Right.
And there's this beautiful, cute little disruption that comes into his life, and everything changes. So yeah, I thought this movie was very effective and sweet, and emblematic of grandparents and grandchildren relationships, I think, where sometimes it takes a little bit for the two to kind of come
Exactly.
together.
Right.
But
Right.
there is this inherent, almost undefinable, if that's a word, love between grandparents and grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
even more so than perhaps parents and children, because I think it can be hard for parents to care for their children, figure all that stuff out, the mechanics of it. They're also responsible for bringing a child up, which is so complicated. It's so much more, versus I think when you've done that for your own kid, and now you have, at least this is my perspective, now you have grandchildren, you kind of have this inherent sense of love for them through your own children, because you've
Right.
seen them through all of it, right? And in some ways also a way for you to connect to a little one that you probably couldn't connect to when your own children were of that age, right? So I think there's a lot of inherent love and affection that comes in, and I love that this movie takes time to sort of tease that out, but not in a very melodramatic, pronounced kind of way.
Right, right. It's like I think this movie does highlight, and also I felt this way too, just the difference between a relationship with a parent and the love between parent and child versus grandparent. Because with a parent, a lot of it is, at least with the child, like from a transactional level, like, yeah, you're taking care of me, like you're keeping me
Yeah, you're
alive, you're
a
giving me all the things
dependent.
that I need. So it's very obvious, like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is what love is between a parent and a child. And a grandparent is not, or at least, sometimes grandparents do raise children, but at least in my situation, they didn't. So it's like, okay, well, what is this love then? But you do feel there's something there, in the same way that in this film, Heidi and her grandfather do figure out how to express that love and show it and feel it. And that is something that does take time with a grandparent, because you're not around them a lot. They're not providing you with life in the same way that your parents kind of have to keep you alive if your grandparent is not your caregiver. And I like how this movie kind of shows that there is this inherent love between a grandparent and grandchild, just simply for the fact that you're related to this person, and you do feel that love, that it's just a different form of it. And I think this movie unravels to over time, which again, that relationship can take time. You start out as like, who is this person? Like, why am I like, most of Heidi's like, okay, why am I here? Like, I don't know who you are either. And the same way that he doesn't really know who you are. She's just some girl who's dumped on his doorstep. But they develop that relationship over time, to the point where he again is like having to seek her out and find her when she gets essentially kidnapped
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
the end of the second act of the movie, to go and be this best friend for an invalid rich
Companion.
person. Yeah, a companion basically,
Mm-hmm.
which is an odd thing. But I think it just does a very good job, like you said, too, of not over dramatizing that, but it's all sort of there. I mean, I think a lot of it too is like they want to focus a lot on just Heidi, just because it's Shirley Temple, and she has a song and dance routine like she always does, and
Right.
she is such a magnetic screen personality that they
Oh,
don't want to afford the grandfather too much screen time because it's mainly about Shirley Temple, and that forces him, who does a great job in this film, by the way, the
yeah,
actor
he's great.
Arthur Josephson, forces him to do things more subtly and not be so obvious because he's not going to get the screen time. And it's also hard sharing the screen with Shirley Temple, who just sort of exerts a lot of that attention and energy. Actually, is this the first Shirley Temple film you've seen, or have you seen other of her films?
I'm pretty sure I've seen other movies of hers. I can't remember now. I was trying to think about that when I watched this movie, and I was like, have
Mhm.
I? I'm sure I have, but clearly I need to go and watch more of her stuff because she's just amazing. I've seen obviously clips and such of
Yeah.
her, a lot, but yeah, I need to watch more of her for
Yeah,
sure.
her personality is very unique and just sort of like precocious. She's sort of a brat, but she's lovable, and she is
And
such
just very
a
sweet,
so
and
sweet at the same time.
yeah, and grown up too, but still childlike. Like when she shows up, she's like, "Oh, there's no bed for me. Fine, I'll just make this little hay thing, and I'll
Right.
be
Yeah.
okay." And it's just very sweet, and very few people can pull that off. I think because this can get saccharine or
Yes.
unbelievable or annoying or all of it, but she just has a unique way to make all of it feel real and also screen worthy.
Yes. No, for sure. I mean, that's a very unique, probably one of the best child actors who has ever graced the screens easily
Yeah,
is her. And again,
yeah,
this is not my favorite movie of hers or the one that I think is the best version of her, sort of on-screen persona, but it definitely, she carries this film.
yeah. And I also love kind of the mountain town and where they're at. The setting is very beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's black and white, but and it's probably shot in Burbank, but
Right, right,
uh,
right.
just the setting of being in a mountain town and a lodge, and it's like a good holiday movie in that sense as well. In fact, there is a holiday thing happening during the movie, so
Yes. No, yeah, there is, which is
it's a great
another.
holiday movie.
Yeah, which is another reason why I too associate this a lot with my relationship, especially with my grandfather, because I only really saw him around the holidays,
Right.
especially around Christmas, which this movie takes place. And there's a lot of great, singing moments in this film too, and that's a lot of the memories I associate with him, just going over and singing these carols and these Christmas hymns and things like that. And that Heidi does that with her grandfather in this movie, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some religious themes in this film too,
Mm-hmm.
which I definitely did not pick up on as a kid, but man, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it definitely has a very strong moral point of view, which was
Yeah.
interesting. Like marriage is good, family's important, you got to go to church, children should know their place,
Yeah.
a lot of focus on, the Christian value of forgiveness, like things like that was not apparent to me as a kid, but watching it's like, whoa, like this is definitely has a very strong message that it's trying to get across.
Yeah.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.